Good evening, welcome folks. I'm Dawn Brown, I'm one of the development managers with the Scottish Community Development Centre. I'm here to talk to you tonight about participatory budgeting and the work that we do supporting PB Scotland and also the Green PB Action Group. For those of you that don't know us, SCDC is the lead body for community development in Scotland. We work to support a strong, fair and sustainable Scotland. We work directly with community groups and organisations, community development practitioners, and by that we mean folks like yourselves that give so much time in our communities to make wonderful things happen, government and other policymakers, local partnerships and agencies across Scotland who want to involve communities in their work. And that's things like we work with Scottish Fire and Rescue, we've done some work with Police Scotland and other organisations like that. And as said, we support the PB Scotland work area and website, and also the Green PB Action Group. And when you get the slides out later, you'll find these are clickable links that take you straight to those different sites that we've got information on. So why is PB important? PB actually answers a lot of the responses about public participation. We're really strong in a belief that people have a right to be involved in the decisions that matter most to them and to have a real say in that. So these are the International Association of Public Participation core values, and you'll see here that the parts that are highlighted in yellow really are what makes a good PB process. It's things that, you know, people have a right to be involved, that their public contribution should influence decisions. It should be supporting and promoting sustainable decisions that are recognised and communicating the needs of all that are involved. And that includes decision makers as well as local authorities and other people. Public participation really seeks to get the involvement of those who may be affected or interested in a decision. So when it comes to PB, that's the folk in our communities. We're also talking about the fact that it seeks input from participants in designing and deciding how they participate themselves, and that should be done in a meaningful way. And it really is that important bit at the last point there, that we actually feed back to people. We let them know how their input has affected the decision. And in PB, particularly in the small grants model, that's beautifully easy because we can tell people your votes actually helped us get these projects funded. So that's a wee bit about the background about why people should participate and why we talk about participation. So what is PB and what does it look like? PB is actually really a simple way for people to get involved in how public money should be spent. It allows people to get together and think about how they identify and prioritise public spending projects, and it gives them the power to make the decisions that matter. In Scotland, we have kind of two different types of PB at the moment. We have small grants PB, which is the use of small pots of money or grants. And this can be, we say small grants, and then one of the bits of work that Alistair's going to talk to you is about the Just Transitions PB. And that's actually a £1.5 million pot. So this small pots of money can be as big as we can get, basically as big as we can get our paws on and get out to the communities to decide on. And then we also talk about mainstream participatory budgeting. And this is where the public are involved and get in kind of setting particularly local authority budgets. Back in 2019, COSLA and the Scottish Government agreed that 1% of local authority budgets should be decided through participatory budgeting processes. We're seeing different levels of that happening across the country at the moment, and also different ways that that's being designed. But what I'm going to talk to you tonight is mainly about the small grants PB, because as community councillors, those are the ones that you're more likely to have that kind of influence in. And we can talk about mainstream at a different point if that would be something that interests you. So good PB should be an 8-stage process. It's where you get people to come together and identify and form a planning group. And that's really important in terms of hearing that voice and getting people involved at the earliest possible stage to help design what the processes look like. And I know Alistair's going to give you some great examples that help you actually build the full picture and the flesh on the bones of what this actually looks like. Simple step, giving your PB process a name, then thinking about agreeing the fund criteria and themes. Now, this one can often be a bit of a challenge because we're often driven by the person that's given us the money to be able to run a PB. So although we say agree fund criteria and themes here, it might be about actually really clarifying what does that look like in your community. So we've seen PB that's been done round about social isolation and loneliness, and it might be thinking about what does that look like in our community? What do we want to fund? What don't we want to fund? And often these things are quite time bound as well. So you might be thinking about what's achievable at that stage. Then you want to get into the fun parts of PB. You want to get into communicating the aims and thinking about how you market that, and hopefully get loads and loads of great, vibrant and exciting applications coming forward. You then want to come back to that, your initial planning group, and think about how you process those applications. You want people to go through a rigorous scrutiny, but that group should never make the decisions. If an application is good enough to go forward to the public vote, it absolutely should go forward. And then you get into, again, another beautiful bit about PB is the decision events. And I know Alistair's going to talk really warmly about some of these. And it's always my favourite bit as well, is when you see folks coming together and actually really seeing the difference that that money is making in communities. The results, and you give community feedback, and then you actually give that money out to folks and they do go and do great things. And then it's into the evaluation and processing and looking at what the impact of that money has been. And again, that's a really important part, because if we're lucky enough to have kind of recurring opportunities to do this, each and every time we run a PB process, we change and we grow and we do things differently and we take that learning with us. So a little bit about what do they actually look like. So we've spoken about here, ideas are generated about how a budget should be spent and using a deliberative process. This can also be part of mainstream PB, where if our local authority have an idea about, it might be about a play park spend, where they actually are looking to say, what should we be targeting in this play park in your area? Or how should we be using our open space budget? What should we be doing in terms of our roads maintenance? And actually people come together to really think about that budget and get really thoughtful and careful about how it's used. Usually people come forward and vote for their preferred project, and then the project with the most votes gets funded. Really quite a simple process. And I think sometimes when we talk about PB, we get ourselves tied in knots and we make it more difficult than it ever needs to be. Some of the ways that local authorities are looking at it as well in terms of that mainstream spend is, for this bit about the ideas generation, they're actually looking at things that communities have already done. So if you've been involved in a community-led local action plan, or if you're involved in some of the community-led local development type organisations, local authorities are being quite clever and actually looking at that. So they're not coming back out to communities and saying, we want your ideas again. They're actually looking at what's already there, what's already been generated, and then using that to drive their own PBs. Voting can be done in a number of ways across PB, and it's always, as I said earlier, it's always one of those fantastic fun days where people hopefully get events where we can come together. And there's loads of things there. So you can, spread voting is just that it's very rare in a PB process to only get one vote. And again, this helps kind of balance out that kind of bias in our communities where you might have, one really popular project that has a large following behind it and would obviously come in and swoop and take some of the money out of that process. So by spread voting, normally anywhere between kind of 5 up to kind of 10, even 12 votes. And that just helps other projects get a say as well. And it does mean, when we're having the vote days, that it balances out that where, maybe a young football team have been able to get their mums and dads and their grannies and their aunties and their uncles and all their pals to come. And because they're having to vote for other projects as well, it just spreads that vote across a number of different projects. There's loads of different ways to vote now as well. There's various different online platforms, simple things from, Google Docs. There's Jot forms, Survey Monkeys. You can vote on Mentimeter. Loads and loads of different bits there. If it's something you were thinking about, please do get in touch with us at PB Scotland and we can certainly help guide your thinking there. When we're thinking about the in-person ones, we're always saying, in terms of that green PB, try and think a wee bit greener. Can we use tech when we're in person rather than printing off, hundreds of voting forms? Can we actually set it up so that we have a number of iPads on the day? And I know that that's something that Money for Murray will talk to you about investing into. And weighted voting is just something to flag up that if there are equalities projects, you can actually give them a wee bit of a boost and actually say, a vote for a simple equalities project would be, one vote for that would be worth 3 votes compared to everybody else. But again, that's something that your steering group and your committee would think really carefully about in terms of meeting the needs for your area for PB. A few years ago now, we at SCDC developed the Charter for Scotland. And again, you'll get this on that wee clickable link on the process there. And it's just saying that the PB should actually be all of these wonderful things that we think about. It should be fair and inclusive. I think that goes without saying. We want it to be as open as possible. We want as many people to get involved. And that's not just about the voting part. That's about how we actually think about the projects that might come forward and vote. Obviously, we want it to be participatory and deliberative. We want people to be involved in making careful and thoughtful decisions that actually make a difference and empower their communities. We want it to be creative and flexible, and we want to find ways to make it transparent so that it is obvious and clear where the decisions are being made, who's making the decisions, and how that's happening. And there is a Scottish desire to see that as part of our democracy going forward. I'm going to really quickly rattle through this one. So the benefits of PB. Done well, PB actually helps to build really strong relationships between people, communities and public organisations. It builds trust and it makes joint action possible. When we get together to think and plan, we can actually do great things together. It really does encourage democratic participation. I know in a number of the PB votes that I've seen, there are people coming forward that wouldn't come forward and vote in a local council election, wouldn't get involved in that side of democracy. And when we can actually show them that their vote makes a difference, that hopefully builds that belief that participatory democracy is something that can be really useful and good, and they can have a say. It really helps us to target resources, and it helps us to encourage the testing of new ideas and can really be transformative in our communities. It can get new projects up and running. It can try different things. I think there's less fear of failure with PB because it's seen as being something that's delivered and driven by a community design and desire. And that makes such a difference. And it also means that, the transparency part of it, people are able to see who the decisions are being made by, how money is spent, and also follow up on what happens and how that makes a change. The real local benefits. Done well, PB can build really strong relationships locally. It creates opportunities for groups and applicants to learn more about each other. I can remember in one PB I was running and it was absolutely beautiful. Sadly, one of the groups didn't get funded. Not everybody can get funded within PB, same as we can't all get funded within charitable grant applications. But two of the groups there were having a wee bit of a blether about what was happening. And one of the groups that was successful for their project said to the project that didn't get funded, you know what, we can build that for you. What they wanted was a kind of bespoke unit for a changing unit for disabled children to access a service. Now, they didn't get enough funds for the grant fund, but the other group turned around and says, we can build that and we can make it absolutely bespoke. And it ended up that the group that didn't get funded actually said it was the best thing that happened that they didn't get funded because they got a much better unit out of those conversations. So it's little bits like that that PB allows to happen. It's a direct investment of money into our communities and groups, and that's so important in terms of that, local involvement in the funding decisions, but also building trust between funders and communities to show that it can be delivered really well. And often in PB, it's small amounts of money. And it really does enable discussion around local priorities that then can influence other service budgets. And I think that's particularly where the move into the mainstream PB part is so exciting and interesting, that this is actually starting to make a difference in the way our local authorities spend their money. We've seen Police Scotland running some local PB processes as well, round about youth disturbance and antisocial behaviour. So there's a real lot of movement in there. And that is my last slide. So I'm going to stop sharing so we can pass on to Alistair, who's going to give you a really great flavour about that more local context and what it feels like, and running it from the Joint Community Councils of Moray and the Money for Moray side of things. Alistair, over to you.
Okay, folks, my name is Alistair Kennedy, as Don said. I am actually the founder of the Money for Moray group, but I also chair the Joint Community Councils of Moray. And through that post, I was approached by an officer from Moray Council, and he asked if I would be interested in undertaking a PB exercise. This was a way back, I think it was 2016. I had done a wee bit of research into PB while doing my social sciences degree, so I knew a little bit about PB, so I said I would be delighted. I sent out invitations to all the community councils in Moray, the area forums, and the Federation of Village Halls and Associations. We had 16 or 18 responses, so we set up the group from that. The funding for the PB exercise that time turned out to be £60,000 from the Scottish Government, much funded by the Moray Council. It was earmarked for economic development, so it actually led to two exercises. The first one that we did was for 60,000, the following one was for 55. Too bad. So as I say, we started in 2016. The theme, as I said, was economic development, which we really didn't get a say in, but it was fine. We worked away with that. So we were the very first completely voluntary group running PB in Scotland. We may still be, I don't know. But I must say, it's been an absolutely brilliant group. I'm very proud of the group. They're a fantastic bunch of people, and we're very, very sociable as well. So from that first exercise, we carried on. We managed to access funding from then on. And each PB exercise needs a theme to hang it on, and we use various themes over the years, and there's 4 examples there. Because of the Scottish Government's proposal that all local authorities should spend at least 1% of their budget using PB, we made a point of inviting or involving elected members along. You know, they just love handing out cheques. But that's a quote from our local, well, our Lossiemouth, but quite local councillor, John Cow, who is now, what is he now? Civic leader. So he's really enthusiastic, as are most of the elected members in Moray, to be honest. So we had been successful. We normally had used a theatre style presentation. That meant applicants got up on the stage for a couple of minutes, 2 minutes, and we timed it quite strictly. They gave their spiel about why they're applying for the money. They had to stay up there for another 2 minutes and take questions. Questions were various. Some we spoke about, can you have a silly question earlier on? Some of them were a wee bit funny, but we had a bunch of kids at one exercise, and they were absolutely brilliant. They asked all the questions that the adults were sort of frightened to ask. So every person in the room was given a pack with some of the information, a brief summary of the information on all the applications, but also they had their voting slips. Speaking about theatre style events, we did a few, but the last theatre style event we held, we had over 300 people signed in. So at 10 votes each, that's a lot of votes. The team did have it down to a fine art though, and they were quite quick. During the wait for the voting, for the counting the vote, people ate their free lunch, which was provided, and that took a bit of time. We also held a free raffle with lots of prizes after lunch to fill in the time. But even then, you can imagine with over 300 people in the room, there was a bit of a wait for the results of the vote. We'd actually become victims of our own success, really. We had been successful in applying for £150,000 from the Investing in Communities Fund once more when COVID struck. Everybody knows when COVID struck. We had just held our first meeting of the exercise and were locked down the next day, the very next day. So we were at a bit of a loss as to how to continue, but we eventually got everybody on Zoom. Even then, we had no idea how we were going to proceed. We decided then we had to go electronic. A finance officer from Murray Council, who was very interested in PB and had been attending our meetings during the previous exercise, I had a meeting with him, and we suggested to him that we use some of the money to run a pilot using Console. However, at the 11th hour, we discovered that Console couldn't do what we would do, like the 10 votes, so we abandoned it. That was a challenge. Setting up application forms and information sheets using Zoom was very, very difficult. We were so glad to get back to face-to-face meetings, which is, there's a social side of the group as well, and that was missing. So we were all delighted to meet up and have a nut and a cup of coffee again. We needed to look at a digital voting platform. So a lady who was part of the community support unit in Murray Council set up a digital platform for us. The unit helped us out with a couple of other things as well. So we did have a bit of support from the community support unit. It was very user-friendly. They had, I don't know how to explain it, they had buttons for each individual application. There was a small amount of information on each button with the application's logo or a photograph. So it made it very, very easy to use. We were still using 10 votes. You couldn't vote with 9 or 11. It had to be 10. It was set up so you could only vote with using 10 votes. We had the vote open for a couple of weeks. But, using this electronic platform, the votes were very easily counted. It was almost instant. So the successful applicants were informed as usual. And we found it was much less labour intensive. However, there was still a need for voting slips because not everybody can work with these digital platforms. I don't know if I've got the right slide here, but I think I have. Bear with me. So after that last exercise, we had become quite well known. We were contacted by the Scottish Government to have a conversation about PB. So we had a conversation and we were asked if we would be prepared to support a PB exercise in Murray. This was a Just Transition PB exercise. The agreement was that there would be 5 partners, AVA, AVCO and Nescan in Aberdeen City and Shire, and TSI Murray here in Murray. So we had a discussion about it, and we went back to the Scottish Government to find out a wee bit more about what they wanted and what would be required. So it was agreed that we would co-lead the exercise here in Murray. That year there was £1 million to be shared equally between Aberdeen City, Shire and Murray, which was brilliant. We had $250,000 to give out. With our first meeting in Aberdeen, and the TSIs were quite concerned because they were sort of diving into the unknown, and it was quite a short time scale. To be honest, we had no concerns whatsoever, which, you know, everybody thought was odd, but we were quite comfortable with the exercise. From then on, we had quite a bit of SCDC support, the whole partnership, and I must sort of wave the flag here because Dawn has been absolutely great. In fact, we've made her an honorary member of Money for Murray. We've had a few co-learning days where we all got together and sort of thrashed out a few ideas and did a bit of brainstorming, etc., etc. Some of us attended a PB caravan in Edinburgh, and we've been to a few other events, always trying to learn a wee bit more about PB. So this second PB exercise was there was a wee bit more money. There was £1.5 million this year, which was up £500,000 from last year. It was capital funding, but there was it's a very small amount of revenue, but there was something this year which was helpful. We decided to change how the funding was allocated because we felt that the previous year, the bigger, better known, mainly social enterprises that were known across Murray, they came out on top of the votes because they were so well known. In fact, they were able to generate quite a substantial amount of votes. So we decided to give $50,000 to the young people to do a PB exercise of their own, which we had done twice previously, in fact, and it was actually amazing to watch the youngsters. They're brilliant at this game. It has become quite a long process with it, 5 partners. It's become a bit bureaucratic, which I suppose is necessary because they're publicly funded bodies where we could have done a PB exercise in 3 months previously. It takes quite a while now. For example, when the votes were counted this time around, it took 2 weeks to get the results because of having to check some of the postcodes, whereas we would have known the same day before. But however, that's the process we've got. We kept to our 10 votes here in Murray this time again, whereas Aberdeen City and Shire dropped to 5 votes. We think that was a bit of a kick back to the poor voting platform we had last year. We had a brilliant voting platform again this year. Last year was basically lines of text, and it was quite difficult to use. So they got quite a bit of response saying that 10 votes were too many. They've gone to 5. That's fine. It's entirely up to themselves. We've stuck to 10 so far. We had, I think it was 18 successful applications this year, with slightly less votes this year than last, which is something we will be looking at. We don't know why. Percentage-wise, as a percentage of the population, we were very similar to Aberdeen City and Shire, but we still had a wee bit less than last year, so that concerns us. The next steps for Money for Money, we don't know. Will there be another PB exercise next year? Just transition PB exercise next year? The signs are that there will be. There's nothing definite, although I think we'll almost be safe to say there will be.